Welcome to the Bookistrator, where I share the stories I love through illustration. In today's video, I'll be discussing the novel The Red Palace by June Hur. As I'm working on this script, I'm realizing it's been over a year since I read this book. For most books, my brain does this handy thing where I start to forget major plot points, and I'm left with how the book made me feel. This book was incredible. It had all the layers I love: historical fiction, dysfunctional family, slow burn romance, intrigue, and murder plots. I've recommended it to so many people in that time that I'm sure everyone is sick of me talking about it. Our story takes place in what is now known as South Korea in 1758. Hyun, the daughter of a noble and his least valued concubine, has few options to make a good life for herself. As a child, she was mentored and taken in by the teacher of a nursing school. Now at 18 years of age, Hyun works as a nurse herself at the palace. On her way home from work one evening, she hears that her old school has been attacked. Running to see if her friends and teachers are all right, she sneaks into the crime scene. She quickly learns that 4 women have been killed, and the prime suspect is her beloved mentor. Horrified but determined, Hyun joins forces with the young police officer named Jin. The two encounter danger, intrigue, and the court politics that now surround this murder case, as the evidence begins to point at the crown prince himself. I threw a lot of ideas around when coming up with an illustration for this book, but settled on a simple character interaction. I decided to draw just the people in the scene, with little hints as to the background elements, which you'll see later, to really emphasize what's happening to them in this moment. I hate spoilers, so without telling too much, this scene takes place towards the very end chapters of the book. Depicted here is Hyun lifting Jin onto her back, trying with all her might to get them both to safety, but I'll go into that more later. As I read the book, I just guessed at how to pronounce their names. I read them as Jin, or even Jin, and Hyun. But once I decided on making the story into one of my videos, I knew I needed to learn how to really say them. So I messaged the author, June Hur, and asked for the spelling of both of their names in Korean. She was so kind and got back to me very quickly. My dad speaks Korean, so he was able to sound out the names using these spellings. I even pulled in a really good friend of mine, Maria Kim, to help me really try to say them right. We found a good middle balance that wasn't perfectly correct, but is kind of the Romanized, anglicized version of how to say the names, which I was a little more comfortable with. As I talk about both of the characters, their names will appear on the left. But even with both June Hur, my dad, and Maria's help, I'm still not entirely sure I'm saying the names correctly. Please let me know if I'm not, but I'm also mostly okay with it. Jin, as I mentioned earlier, is a young police inspector. He's extremely intelligent and a little socially awkward. He's patient and straightforward and the perfect foil to our leading lady. Hyun is strong-willed, a little rash, and very loyal. She's also very smart and has worked hard to earn her place as a palace nurse. She spends the book not only discovering who the murderer is, but proving her own worth and value. To her distant mother, her estranged father, the court, the other healers, and her new partner, Jin. But most importantly, she learns to trust and put value in her own self. These characters worked so hard together to solve the mystery. They both had a deep respect for each other's opinions and choices, and always built one another up. This is the kind of relationship I love. Jin never looked down on Hyun for being a woman, a nurse, or a civilian. She wasn't second class to him, like she was to so many others. He was respectful and encouraged her ideas, treating her in every way like an equal. I loved seeing their friendship and trust in each other grow throughout the story, especially when things settled down at times and they were able to talk. This story was very plot-driven, mainly focusing on proving Hyun's mentor's innocence and figuring out who the real culprit was. There is so much intrigue and so many moving parts, but I never felt lost in the narrative. This is mostly due to the characters who were definitely driving the story. They felt like they were leading the way, not just being shuttled along by plot points. Each tender, heartbreaking, relieving, horrible scene was heightened by the two people in the main roles. but I still felt like I had room to breathe as a reader going on this adventure with them. The illustration itself, while simple, was actually kind of difficult for me. I'm not very practiced when it comes to drawing characters in such close proximity, with body parts overlapping, foreshortening, and weight distribution so important to make the pose look somewhat realistic. Thankfully, my sister and her husband were generous enough to recreate this pose for me, so I could get good reference photos. And as promised to my brother in law, those images will not be shared here, even if I find them hilarious. My family members deserve a huge round of applause for all of the years of posing they have given me. It's not easy to have a sister/daughter who's an artist in need of reference. Thanks, guys. You may notice on the screen at this point that I have lowered the opacity of my line art and am now redrawing Hyun's outfit. I felt like the folds weren't hanging like I thought they should, so decided to go in and give them another try. I debated back and forth with how much they should hang freely and how much they should bump against her legs, feet, and the ground. Not to mention the tension lines created by Ajin's leg resting on her skirt. In the scene, Hyun tears part of her hem to wrap around Ajin's wounds, so I wanted her dress to be shorter and more tattered than it otherwise would be. Skirts were very long during this period, according to my research, so I decided not to make it an extreme rip, as I felt it would be inappropriate for the modesty of this character and her time period to show her legs. Even though in my initial sketch you could see her feet. Ultimately, I covered them with the skirt to be more accurate with the period. You can see the trailing edge more at the left backside of her skirt where I hinted this torn edge. And speaking of research, the amount of work that the author June Hur must have done was incredible. Just go check out her Instagram, linked below if you ever want to see what I'm talking about. She is so passionate about Korean history, and it definitely shows. I felt transported to Korea in the 1700s. I don't know a lot about Korean history, but I became a lot more interested after reading this book, and have been reading more stories from Korea ever since. If you ever have any recommendations, I'd love to hear them, especially if they are more historical or fantasy in nature. While I was doing my own research for the costume designs of the characters here, I had a hard time finding accurate sources as to what they would have worn during the time period. I did find these images on the left, but I'm unsure as to how correct they are. I went with more peasant, middle-class inspired clothing for Ajin, as he's removed his police uniform to fit in with the locals of this scene. Hyun likewise has left her nurse uniform behind, so I fitted her with a simple set of clothes that seemed typical of the period for women. I also wanted to be accurate to the type of hairstyle they each would have worn, and discovered that he would very likely have had a top knot with a headband, and she would have had a middle parted braid in all likelihood, especially in this instance where they are trying not to stand out. If you know of any places on the internet where I can get more reliable sources, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. I have several books set in Korea that I want to illustrate videos for in the future, so I would love to find more accurate websites or books for clothing design. When I was trying to decide on an illustration for this video, I knew it had to be this scene. This moment where Ah-jin is injured and unconscious. Hyun knows the only chance he'll have to survive is her carrying him to safety. He's much bigger than she is, but that doesn't stop her. We don't get to see very many moments where the female character is the one hauling someone onto her back to get help, but I know women who would do this. And I loved reading about it here, feeling like a true depiction of what I see in the women I know and love, and not necessarily in the physical aspect. This is very difficult for her to lift her friend. She struggles every step of the way, but she keeps going, keeps helping, keeps trying. She perseveres in every moment of the book, and to me, that is strength. I've been in dark places too, and every time I don't give up, I win. Even if the goal is just getting out of the bed, it's a victory to me. There were several other scenes I wanted to draw, and again, no spoilers. Like the moment with the lanterns, the chase through the tall grass, the jail scene, and many others. But when I think of this book, this is what I see. I see two people who worked so hard together. I see a female main character doing everything she can to help, even at the very end, where she physically has to lift up her partner to get him out of danger. These characters mean a lot to me, and I'm so glad I got to show you how I saw them in my head as I read their book. I had a good time here as we get to the end of the piece. It's always important to me to add texture to my illustrations, as they feel more real when I do. I also like to use very minimal light sources, as I don't like heavy contrast with light. I prefer to get my contrast from shapes, color, and value, not light cast onto forms. Here I'm hinting at the scene around the figures, not detracting from them as the main focal point. I also don't usually erase my sketch layers when I draw on a blank white background. I like seeing the raw sketchiness peeking through. It makes it feel more human-made to me. Then, of course, I almost forgot to add the blood from Ajen's wounds. Not very scene accurate of me. And in a moment, I'll be adding a blue filter to allude to the scene taking place during the night, just subtly. When I first saw the spine of this book at my library, the title, of course, jumped out at me. I'm a sucker for dramatic titles. Then I flipped to the cover and saw the gorgeous work by Sunga Park and Liz Dresner. The watercolor or ink effect dripping down the illustration and text made the book feel like it was set in a long ago time period. It also harkened back to the use of calligraphy and brush paintings found in Eastern Asia. The face of Hyun, her clothes, and the castle behind her immediately told me that this is a story about a girl in Korea. I love the cover, not only for the great art and design, but because all good books should give you a taste of the book inside, and this one definitely does. As I read the inside flap, my jaw dropped. The main culprit for the murders was the crown prince from Korea in 1758. Why was that ringing a bell? Then I remembered about an infamous crown prince I'd recently heard about on my favorite spooky history podcast, Lore by Aaron Mahnke. What a wild connection, and I was so excited to know more. I checked the book out and finished it over the next few days. This book was a breath of fresh air for me. It was a different culture and a different time period than I usually read about, and written in such a comprehensive way where I didn't feel lost even though this is my first Korean historical fiction. The writing was lush and emotive, making me feel what the characters felt, and setting me in the places they walked and lived. This book has become a common topic among my coworkers, family, and I, as I said earlier, and I'm so glad I stumbled upon it at my local library. It also prompted many discussions about K-pop groups and K-dramas that several of my friends are now suggesting I check out. Thank you so much to June Hur for this beautiful and heartfelt new gem sitting on my bookshelf, and for the help to make sure I got as close as possible to saying the names correctly. 감사합니다. And with that, let's get a closer look at the final image. Thanks for joining me for this week's video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed your time here. Have you read this book? Does it sound like something you might try out? Do you have any book recommendations like this for me to read next? I sure appreciate you being here and hope to see you again next time. Bye!